22 years ago, my wife Brooke and I built this cabin outside of Fairbanks, Alaska. It was 12 foot by 12 foot, and we lived in it for 2.5 years. Last year, I decided to recreate pretty much the same cabin on a piece of property we have in the northern Midwest. And although this cabin is framed and it's not made out of log, I built it to the same dimensions, and my plans are to finish it exactly the same way that the original cabin was finished. In this video, we're going to start right where we left off. We're going to build a small kitchenette, we're going to build a foldable ladder, a sleeping loft upstairs, try to get everything situated before we get snowed out by nasty Midwest weather. Stay tuned. It's been a busy summer and a busy fall. I've been looking forward for so long to getting back up here into the northern woods around the Lake Superior area and get back to work on our 12 by 12 cabin. Last thing we did on this cabin in the spring was I coated all of the tongue and groove with Watco Danish oil, and I basically fumed myself out of the cabin. I thought I was going to die, but I've left the windows open all summer, and it's no scent at all anymore. Whew. Finally, it's been raining all day long and the sun is finally out. It's nice and bright. The other thing I did the last time I was here is stained the entire outside of this cabin. But I ran short of stain and could not find it anywhere. I had to look everywhere to find 1 gallon of this stuff because the back of this cabin is still undone. I brought some Thompson's water seal for this deck too. We get a couple dry days, I'm going to try to get this all sealed up. As long as the weather holds out, it just needs to be warm enough to do a little bit of painting, a little bit of staining, a little bit of sealing, whatever you'd like to call it. And I think we're going to be okay. After that, everything else is indoor work. So if it gets a little cool, I'll just put a fire in the stove and I can work inside. Shouldn't be any issue at all. Now, if I leave my old farmhouse at 6 o'clock in the morning and I drive all day long, just make a couple stops, maybe bite to eat, maybe to check a music store, see if there's any cool guitars, it takes me about 6 hours to get up here to the property. And I've been on the road today for, I don't know, about 7. So I'm going to make myself a cup of tea. I'm going to walk the property a little bit, kind of just decompress, wrap my head around all the stuff that needs to be done on this cabin, and I'm going to get a good night's sleep. Then first thing in the morning, I know everything I've got to do, and I've got all the materials here to get it done. The loft, the ladder, I've got some flooring I need to put in, I've got a set of cabinets I need to build, all just good, simple work. I can't think of a better setting to work in either than this time of the year in this area of the country. In the summer, the bugs are terrible, and in the winter, there's 5 feet of snow, but this is the perfect time to be up here. So what I'm doing with these boards, I'm going to cut them in half, and they're going to be the loft boards. They're actually going to be the floor of the loft in the cabin. About 67 inches. The only thing that really makes me nervous is when you look up the weather for this part of the country, the closest town with a weather station is about 45 miles away, and I'm really close to the lake. So you never know what you're going to get for weather. I'm going to cover up my wood and we'll just settle in for the evening, take a walk, see the property, just kind of decompress from a long day of driving. And then tomorrow morning, first thing, we'll get up early. We're going to hit it hard. And about the time I got done with my walk, jumped in the truck and got ready to drive back to the other cabin, it started to snow. Well, I've got to say it's very pretty out, but this isn't what I wanted. I did not order snow, and I would prefer not to have it. But you can't always get exactly what you want. We're going to go over and put some time in, and hopefully some of this snow will burn off today. It's still a couple days until November, but tell that to the weather. Looks a little less inviting today. Just a construction project in the winter. It's still October. My brother-in-law Scott Harum had turned me on to these lights. It's just like a big strip of tape, and there's these little LED lights on it. And there's a sticky back to them, so you can stick these things up wherever you'd like to have light. The problem is once they sit in cold weather all year long, that adhesive kind of fails. So I'm going to thumbtack these things back into place. We'll get some light going and we'll get to work. Now, when you're miles and miles away from other people and it's cold out, it just it's a desolate feeling. A little bit of light, wow, makes a big difference. Good thing there's a little bit of scrap wood left over from last time I was here. This will get us enough of a fire to warm the place up. It'd be nice and comfortable. After we start building cabins, lofts, ladders, etc., we'll have all kinds of scrap wood, and it just takes a little fire to heat this cabin. A little colder than I thought it'd be. Probably help if I shut that window, and this one, and this door, and this window. Now, the first thing I need to do to put my loft together is I need to get this homemade scaffolding down. I've built this off of the loft and off a ledger board on the other wall. And I've used this scaffolding setup to do everything with the roof. Put the rafters on, insulate the rafters, get in and out of the roof while I was putting the metal on top of the roof, and then ultimately putting all the tongue and groove up. But I think I'm to the point now where everything up top is done, other than the loft. And we're ready to build the loft as soon as I get all of this material down out of that area. Well, I would rather have dry ground to work on. I will have to say, this snowfall is postcard perfect. It's beautiful. I'm certainly glad I covered up the wood. So the plan is to cut 2 loft boards out of each one of these planks and to try to keep them from getting covered in wet snow. Every time I come out here to start working, it just starts snowing more. Every time I cut 2 loft planks, I bring them up and set them on the porch and make sure I brush them off. It's right about freezing. the snow is wet and it's coming and going about every couple minutes. It'll stop and it'll start again. And I'd just like to keep these boards as dry as possible in the event that I could get them sealed up this trip.
Just like that, the sky's blue again.
You can see I'm using this big chunk of 2x12 as a square. I forgot to bring a square. Go figure. Last year when I put these two loft logs in, one was a dead, standing, dry, wonderful log. The other one I had to cut green, and it's twisted a bit. So I have to draw shave off the high spots. All those jaw shavings, though, they're going to make real good kindling. Now, if you see where the top of the wall and the ceiling come together, you can see the paper back of all that insulation right there. I haven't covered that up because I plan on cutting a decorative trim board for the top of the wall. I just haven't done it yet.
Well, I know it looks like it did this morning, but it's actually 5:30 this afternoon, and it's been snowing all day, and getting out of here looks like driving to a car wash. I love this time of year. Well, I like this kind of snowfall, but I don't really want it yet. This is about a month too early. I got the window cleaned off, but I did lose one wiper somewhere on the trail. Well, I finally had to lock it up into four-wheel drive. Doesn't seem to be even slowing down either. It's just snowing and snowing and snowing.
Well, everything has taken me longer than I thought it would. I wonder why. Maybe the foot of snow on the ground. So I've drank through all the water that I brought. So I'm going to have to go down and use the well. But once I draw the water up out of it, I got to make sure that it goes back down the pipe because it's right around freezing. And if we get a good, hard, cold night, well, I'd hate to think of ruining my brand new well. Fun fact, it's been snowing all day long, but about 40 feet away from this well, there's a nice fresh set of wolf tracks. Makes you keep looking around when you know there's a wolf real close. Now, if you look at the well, I'm leaving the handle in the up position. Leaving the handle up is supposed to kind of open the valve on the bottom of the well and let the water back down the pipe. I hope it does, because it's probably a couple degrees below freezing right now, and it's only going to get colder tonight.
Eggs are frozen. Ah. Dead quiet. You can't hear anything out here. You look around here right now, even though today is the 31st of October, looks like when the Grinch stole Christmas. So I set my alarm this morning to get up at like 7 o'clock because it's dark and I can get up and I can have some breakfast, a cup of coffee. About the time it gets daylight, I can go start working on the other cabin. But last night I set my alarm for 7:40, and then where it was AM or PM, I picked the wrong one. And so I got up at like 10 o'clock. But that's all right. I wanted to burn some brush. Now I can't even find the brush because it's under a foot of snow. It's probably 29, 28, 29, 30 degrees. It's below freezing. It's solidly below freezing. but it's not bitter out. You know, I'm just in a fleece and a pair of sweatpants sitting on the porch drinking coffee, and I'm fine. I don't want to be out here all day, but it's pretty pleasant for right now. You bump on any of these trees, you're gonna get a wheelbarrow of snow down the back of your neck, and that ain't gonna be any fun. Well, I think it's time to roll over to the other cabin and get to work. Seems I goofed off until noon. You know, the funny part about all of this is I brought oars for the boat. I was thinking about going out and doing some fishing. I had no idea it was going to be winter.
What an absolutely gorgeous day. These pines and spruce are just gorgeous in this kind of snow. Wow. Look at the back of my truck. I don't even know what's in there anymore. Well, it sure is a late start to this morning, but what a beautiful morning. Won't be any trouble to start a fire with all these shavings from the loft logs. If it wasn't for the mess on the floor and the fact that the loft is halfway done, I would think this was yesterday. Kind of that Groundhog Day vibe up here. Nobody to talk to, or only get 1 or 2 radio stations. And then you're working by yourself in the cold. Pretty soon, one day runs right into the next. Today we're going to finish that loft and we're going to build ourselves a ladder. Now the original cabin, the cabin that this one's patterned off of, it had this same exact style of a ladder. I built a ladder to where you could swing it up off of the floor so you could get it out of the way. Because you only need it once in a while. You know, you're not going up and down the stairs. You only go up to go to sleep at night. That looks about right. Digging out my pile of wood seems to be a thing. I'm starting to feel like I do it every day. Now, I've got several 2x4s here, but what I'm actually looking for is I'm looking for a couple of them that have a little bit of a crown. Because the ladder's load-bearing, I'd like to have a little bit of a crown going up. When I cut in the notches for the foot treads of the ladder, the compression of the ladder is going to make it much more rigid. Now I have a little step ladder I've been using, and I just measured the distance from one tread to the next on that step ladder. That's a good guide. I mean, you could guess and it'd probably be close to right anyway. But these are about a foot apart. Now I'm cutting these notches about 3/4 of an inch deep. I don't really want to weaken the 2x4 any more than that. And I want to make sure that these notches are snug. So when the treads are put in there, they're just going to be chunks of 2x4 also. But I want them to be a nice snug fit. I've always liked cutting notches. There's just something satisfying about taking square sections out of logs or boards. It's just a satisfying thing to do. I can't think of a better word. It's satisfying. Chisel work always has kind of a therapeutic quality to it anyway. It's fun to run a chisel. Once in a while, a squirrel will pass through, and he'll let me know that he's there. And that's about it. Other than that, there are no sounds at all today. It was a little warmer this morning, and there was a lot of dripping and a lot of snow falling out of the trees and some breeze. But it's got kind of calm, and it's got colder. Now I'm lining up these hinges so that they hit the rafters behind the tongue and groove, not just the tongue and groove. This time of year, it's getting dark very early, especially when you stay up late and get up real late. And it always amazes me how very little I get done in a day. In case you're curious of how I'm spending my evenings, I tend to try to wrap things up around 4:30 over at the other project. That gives me time to come back, split some wood, make a little bit of dinner. I listen to the radio, I read a lot. What I've been doing a lot lately is I've been journaling and keeping up on, day-to-day things that go on. I write down notes. But I've also been going back through the years trying to figure out what happened in what year and kind of retro journaling, I suppose. Because like so many people, I would imagine, it's hard to figure out what happened in what year. What did you do with your time? So a lot of reading, a lot of writing, some listening to the radio. I was up for 4 or 5 days and got to the point I was a little low on groceries and kind of sick of the snow, so I took 4 or 5 days off. Well, at least it's dry right now. It's dry and it's not super cold, but by tomorrow, it's supposed to snow. If there's one thing I'm becoming keenly aware of, it's how bad my timing is this fall. I came up last week and worked in the snow for 4 or 5 days, and then I went home and all the snow melted. So I worked through the bad weather and I wasn't here during the good weather. And unfortunately, there's snow in the forecast again. Even though it's all melted, it ain't gonna stay that way. So we're gonna make a Conestoga wagon out of this truck. So at least, if we get a bunch more snow, which is predicted, I won't have to root through the bed of the truck in a foot of snow looking for tools and materials. Well, I gotta say, I'm kind of sick of this. Every time I get a break in the weather, I get ready to roll and then snow. Again. But it's supposed to warm up later on this week. Hopefully we'll get everything done that we're shooting for. And today, well, I don't know, man. Maybe today I'm just gonna charge up batteries and sit by the wood stove and wait for it to warm up tomorrow. It's only an inch or two of snow today. And it's nothing as bad as it was last week. But everything is damp and wet and chilly. And I kind of don't have the heart to just go pawing around in the snow over at the other cabin. So I'm going to take care of some stuff I've been needing to do for a while. The other night, I had a mouse crawling around in the ceiling, making quite a racket. Maybe there was 2 of them. So I know one thing I've got to do. I've got to mouse-proof this roof. You know, when you're sitting out here and there's nothing else for sound, and a mouse is crawling around up in your insulation, it sounds like a raccoon. So I'm going to take flashing and I'm going to cover up the gap between the 2 ridge boards because a mouse can get in there. And then I'm going to take, once that gap between the top 2 boards is covered, I know that a mouse can't climb up the wall and go between those 2 boards and get up into the roof that way. There's squirrel blocks on both sides, so they can't get in on the sides. They can only get in the back or in the front. I'm also going to take this hardware cloth. It's a galvanized wire mesh. And I'm going to plug up every ridge in the roof metal. That way the roof can still breathe, it can still have ventilation, but it's going to keep the mice out. Well, maybe that was it for the bad weather. About 9:30 in the morning, just had some breakfast, some coffee. Everything is melting. It's windy. It's just as bad as if it was raining out right now. I think I'm just gonna hold off for a few hours, maybe. Let all this junk fall out of the trees, because over at the other cabin, I don't have a porch to be underneath of to work, so I would just be getting soaked the whole time. So we're just gonna hang out for a bit. Let this beautiful morning kind of burn all this snow and ice out of these trees. Well, not every decision I make is a good one, that's for sure. But covering up the truck, I think it was the right thing to do. Once again, we kind of got that Groundhog Day feeling. I feel like I did this yesterday. Well, The only thing that's going to shake that feeling is some major progress. So that's what we're going to shoot for today. Last week I was up here and it was warm and dry for about 12 hours, and I thought, I'm going to seal this deck. This deck hasn't been dry since then. Well, once I start building, I'll have tons of scrap to burn, but for right now, I'm going to have to cut a little bit of these dead limbs just to get enough of a fire going to take the chill off. Today we're going to finish all the trimming in all these windows. It's going to take a couple hours, but it's one of the things that really makes a cabin look like it's finished. Nothing says construction site more than unfinished windows. Now, this old table saw has been with me on every job for the last 5 years, probably. And I love it and I hate it. I love it because it's smooth and it runs beautifully. It doesn't have that abrupt, nasty startup that a modern table saw has because it's run by a belt. It's just a joy to use. But it's probably the heaviest table saw I've ever had. It must weigh 100 pounds, which is ridiculous. And it's small, so you can't really cut a lot of big stuff on it. So it has its ups and downs and pluses and minuses and positives and negatives like every other tool you could buy. But it is a joy to use. I love this part of a construction job where you can kind of shut your brain off and just cut material. The only thing you really got to do is make sure you keep your fingers out of the way. So you can't shut that part of your brain off. But basically, I'm going to spend an hour just ripping down material to trim out these windows. That's a pleasant hour. A windowsill really makes you feel like you're getting somewhere. That's just lovely. Now, the best thing about the ladder that we built is that you can swing it up and latch it in place and get it out of the way. Because the last thing you want in a tiny, tiny little cabin is a ladder right in the middle of your floor. So we're going to put this hook on, swing the ladder up out of the way, and reclaim all this real estate floor space. Now it's time to cut up the plywood. This plywood kind of feels like an old friend. It's been with me since the very beginning of this project. It's been scaffolding and it's been tabletop on sawhorses to work off of. It's kind of served a whole bunch of purposes, and now it's going to get turned into kitchen cabinets. Now, I built lots of cabinets over the years. I built some really nice cabinets, and I built some really crappy cabinets. I've never built the same kind of cabinets twice, and I've never had a set of plans. I just kind of do what seems right at the time. But one thing I won't do, I cannot bring myself to go to a box store and buy chipboard cabinets. Call me a snob, but I'd rather have homemade cabinets than particle board. I just can't do it. Now, one thing I try to always avoid is I try to avoid telling people this is the right way to do something, because there really is 1,000 ways to skin a cat. And that's the problem with kitchen cabinets. There really is 1,000 ways to do it. So I've spent days trying to figure out how I wanted to make these cabinets, what size I wanted to make them, and just the whole building process of the cabinets themselves. You know, it really does just come down to, once again, I'm just doing what seems right at the time. So you might be asking, why did I cut the cabinet pieces and then go back to doing trim? Well, those two big pieces of plywood were taking up a lot of space in this cabin, and this cabin doesn't have much for space to start with. And I needed them out of the way. So I figured it was a good time to take them outside, cut them all up, and it gives me a lot better access to these windows. The best thing about having all the material cut and running a little brad nailer, shouldn't take any time at all to wrap these windows up. Now you'll notice around these windows there's a little gap on the edge. When I was doing the tongue and groove, I ended up with a bunch of extra pieces, and they were all about 1.5 inches shorter than what they needed to be. So as opposed to buying extra tongue and groove, I just ran them a little short by the windows. Because there's 2 studs there anyway, they have 1.5 inches to nail into, and then there's 1.5 inches gap. I'll just put a little piece in there, and then that will get covered by the window trim. I ended up with very little leftover tongue and groove from what I bought. And some of that scrap leftover is going to make drawers. And some of it's going to make little trimmer pieces. And some of it's going to make kindling. That sure makes for a lot better look, that trimmed in window. Time to build our kitchenette. A little bit of counter space, a little sink, a couple drawers, couple cabinets, just the basics. Now I want my sink right in the middle of the window, and I want the same amount of counter space on either side. So I found the center with the level, and I made a center mark on the floor, and then I'm measuring out either direction. I'm going to have about an 8-foot countertop. It's going to leave me a little space on either end. Probably put a little broom, wastebasket area on one end, and on the other end, I don't know, maybe a shelf. That sounds good. Like a standing shelf. 5 or 6 little shelves in that. And what I've decided is, as opposed to building the cabinets as standalone units, I'm going to build them in place. What this board is right here, it's going to be a ledger that's going to hold up the back of the countertop eventually. And I'm making these little inlets in that ledger. And my partitions for the counter are going to key into those little indents in that ledger. I set a nail in the wall so I can slide this ledger to that nail and I know exactly where it needs to be screwed. And then of course I've used my pieces, my cabinet partitions, put them up against the wall and I measured their actual height. You know, they always say a picture is worth 1,000 words. This is how I'm fastening it all together. Pretty simple. And of course it comes back to, is this the right way to do it? I don't know. It's just a way to do it. And in so many things, when it comes to building, a good way to do it is as good as the next good way to do it. So I'm just doing what seems right at the time. You know, the funny thing about this whole job is this is the first time I've been without my hammer in 25 years. The hammer I've used to build every single thing I've built since the late 90s. I gave it to my son Mick this year when he started building his cabin in Alaska. I miss that hammer. This one just feels like swimming with your socks on. I guess I'll have to get used to it. A couple years ago, Brooke was really getting into building, so I bought her a titanium hammer for Christmas. It weighs nothing, and it's got a great big giant face on it that's really hard to miss nails with. I think I'm going to get myself one of those. You know, the older you get too, the less you want to swing a heavy hammer. I think it's time for one of those light, fancy hammers. This is my view in the middle of the night when I'm reading by a headlamp. And this is my view first thing in the morning when hopefully it's not snowing anymore. One problem I ran into right off the bat, I ran out of gas. I had to go down to where my sawmill is and pull the bolt out of the float bowl and steal my own gas. Imagine that. But it's a good thing that I had gas in that mill because the nearest gas station is a 2-hour drive there and back. And with all the snow and the thawing and the freezing we've been having in the last couple weeks, these logging roads around here are an absolute nightmare. So hopefully this is enough gas to wrap things up for us. Hopefully it's good enough gas it runs. So far so good. Today we're going to be wrapping up these cabinets as best we can. And we're also going to make the drawers. Now what I'm doing here is I'm cutting drawer bottoms out of what's left of our 1/2-inch plywood that's been with us this whole project. And I'm also going to make some drawer slides. Now what these do is they basically give a little guide rail system for the drawer to slide in and out of, so the drawer's not flopping around. Now this board that I'm cutting right now and that I'm notching out, it's going to be the ledger that the drawer slides sit in. Now I'm not going to explain too much about it because it's so much easier just to see what it's doing once it's installed. But this is how I'm cutting it. Fairly self-explanatory once you see it, and once I drop the drawer slides in, it'll make perfect sense. Time to build the drawers. Not only the drawers, but the cabinet doors. So it's going to be a nice, peaceful half an hour running the table saw, and then we're going to start putting some stuff together. You know, honestly, I guess that's why I love this table saw, because it's peaceful to run it. Even though it's heavy and it's old and it's clunky, it's really smooth, and a lot of modern table saws are just kind of angry sounding. That must be why I like this one. Just the way it sounds. Building the boxes for the drawers is very simple work. Now we're going to put in the drawer bottoms. Now what I like to do with the bottoms is I like to not have them flush with the drawer box, but I'd like a little bit of that board sticking out, so the bottom of the drawer itself isn't sliding along the rails, just the edges. Now the drawers are by no means done. They need a drawer face. The face of the drawer needs to be routed. The face of the drawer needs a handle. There's a lot that needs to happen still. But I'm just going to build them and put them in place, and also finish the face of these cabinets. That way all that stuff is out of the way. Now for the cabinet doors, they're about as simple as you can imagine. And I'm just putting them together with screws. Even though this wood is kiln dried lumber, it's going to shrink and there's going to be a little tiny gap in the middle. When you put them together with screws like that, later on you can just back the screws out, tighten the boards together, and then you can glue the backs on. Now I hope you understand that this is not my countertop. This is just a couple pieces of plywood that are left over, cut down to 2 feet. But I'm going to use it as a temporary, kind of a temporary countertop, but more or less just a catch-all. I need to put everything up and out of the way so I can have the floor open. Because I have some laminate flooring I'm going to put in, and I need everything off the floor. Now the reason I'm going with snap laminate is I want something that's not wood colored. Everything in this cabin is wood. The walls are wood, the ceiling's wood, the gable ends are wood, the cabinets are wood. I'd like a different color for the floor, just for something else to look at. So we're going to try some of this snap laminate. The last time I did laminate flooring was in 2008, and I put it over top of a cement floor in a log house I built. Now one thing I do hate about laminate flooring is cutting laminate flooring is nasty. I actually have to cut all of this with my left hand just to keep my face out of the way. It's kind of a plastic composite material, so you get hard, large chunks of plastic flying at your face. Not exactly what you want. And the dance goes something like this in such a small place. Work a little, sweep a little, move a little junk. Work a little, sweep a little, move a little junk. Unfortunately, I'm to the point where I gotta move the stove, which is heavy and dirty. And just like that, with a bunch of back-breaking labor and a whole lot of travel and a lot of nasty weather and a lot of work, we're pretty much done.
Well, we just about got it wrapped up for now. If the weather permits, I'd like to get back up and finish the doors to the cabinets, finish the trim around the baseboard, that sort of thing. But I've had nothing but snow and rain. So for the moment, we're gonna call it all for this year. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name's Dave Whipple. You've been watching Bush Radical. And be radical, eh? See you soon.